Hey everyone, Firegrass here, and today we're going to be talking about Stranglegasp, one of the most insane uniques GGG has ever added into the game. Okay, so earlier today, GGG previewed a new unique that is coming out next week, and that is Stranglegasp. It's pretty insane. I'm probably going to be saying the word insane a lot during this video because that's the only way to describe what's going on here. I have spoken to a couple of other content creators, and most of us agree this is really quite bonkers, and I know it doesn't look it at first glance, but the potential on this item is just unbelievable, and I'm just going to say it right now so that you don't have any misconceptions throughout the rest of the video. I expect this to potentially be Hateforge level rarity. Now, I do hope I'm wrong, and I do hope that you all get to play around with this item because it's really cool, and I'm going to show you why in a second, but do expect this to potentially be extremely rare. The cap on this is just out of this world, and that's what we're going to talk about. So for those who aren't clear what this means, you can basically anoint this item 4 times. The initial base anointment that you can put onto any item, and then 3 additional anointments, right? That's what enchantment modifiers mean. And that opens up a whole variety of different options. I'm not going to spend as much time talking about those options as other creators, because I do want to bring to your attention 2 other things that I don't see a lot of talk about that I think are actually more important than the various combinations we can come up with. I will start by going over some of the more obvious combinations, some of the examples that I think should make the case as to why this is a really great item. So if you're using this as a pure life amulet, and by the way, this entire list, I'm only using 3 anoints, and the reason I'm using 3 anoints is so that you can compare the stats here to the stats on a regular amulet, because a regular amulet is going to have a anoint already on it, just like this is going to have 3 anoints plus an anoint. So we only want to compare the explicit stats on the amulet, which means the 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes of a normal amulet versus the 3 anoints on this amulet, or the unique mods on another amulet compared to the 3 anoints on this amulet. So let's go through that. Okay, so let's say you're using this as a life amulet. You could include Discipline and Training, Heart of the Warrior, and Constitution. That would give you 34% max life and 70 max life. That's really crazy, you know, like Belly of the Beast is kind of comparable to this, except this is an amulet. You don't have to give up body armor, or you can use this in conjunction with the body armor. This is like a hell of a lot of life. It's actually really crazy that they're even allowing this, because the defensive potentials of a lot of characters just went right through the roof. Whenever, I think Palstron made a video talking a bit about this concept, that basically, if you're ever playing a character that sort of has overkill damage, like a bow character or something like that, and you figured, you know, you have enough damage, you don't need your amulet anymore, well, congrats, you now can get like really tanking compared to what you could get before thanks to this amulet. This alone is just like insane, right? Like, if you really think about how applicable this is to so many builds out there, it's mind-boggling, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, so what's some other stuff we have? Generic crit, 70% increased crit and 70% crit multi. This might have some applications for custom crit builds that want both spell and attack crit. You can get 140% increased crit and 60% crit multi with spell crit using just 3 anoints. And again, you know, to drive this home, this is 3 anoints. So this is the 3 anoints plus another crit anoint, which means it's even stronger than, you know, like whatever it's appearing here. But, you know, these are pretty good stats. If you think about what you can get on a regular amulet, tier 1 crit multi on a regular amulet doesn't give you 60% crit. Tier 1 increased crit chance doesn't give you 140% increased crit. So yeah, you may in this case give up access to max life, but like this is a hell of a lot of crit that you otherwise have no access to. There are some also like other applications for it. So like if you were playing Toxic Rain, for example, you could get one with Corruption and then Potency of Will and Exceptional Performance, and that's giving you 20% increased Wither effect on top of 50% skill effect duration, which is going to buff the hell out of your damage. It also means that it's going to probably, you won't need to run other sources of increased skill effect duration necessarily. You could just go for more multipliers. You could also use this to anoint things like Panopticon and Watchtowers for the +1 totem early in a league where the ballistas are doing a larger part of your DPS. Now, a similar setup could work for Blade Vortex. This has a lot of potential for Blade Vortex. You could run the skill effect duration anointments with +1 Unleash, and suddenly this is a hell of a lot of quality of life added to Blade Vortex in a world where Blade Vortex really needs it, right? Like, if you've played Blade Vortex recently, it could really use some of this quality of life, and this amulet, I mean, it is a bit of a price to pay giving up an amulet slot, but hey, whatever works, right? Now, some other applications for it. You got like a generic setup where you could put Whispers of Doom, Constitution, and Marked for Death, and you'd be getting +1 curse, you'd be getting a bunch of increased max life, some increased damage, as well as Culling Strike. Staves have, I think, the highest sort of cap in terms of what you can get into for crit value. So you're getting 140% increased crit chance and 80% crit multi on top of getting like some block accuracy and knockback effects. Now, the reason I mentioned staves in particular is because staves tend to have very bad paving on the tree. So I'll just sort of like give you an example. A lot of attack stave builds want to sort of operate in this part of the tree. It's already a lot to pave up here for counterweight, but having to go further up for Blunt Trauma and Serpent Stance, like, this is a lot of paving. And sometimes you do it because you can pick up all the staff nodes that are sort of in this area, and you can make it worth your while. You can get some life nodes here and maybe invest into something like Sovereignty. You know, it makes it worth paving up here, but you would still prefer if there was a way that you didn't have to pave up here. And this amulet basically just lets you get, you can ignore this entire segment of the tree, because suddenly you're getting all the good staff nodes here, so you don't have to find other reasons to pave up here. You can just stick to this part of the tree, maybe go down here, all that sort of stuff. And there are similar applications to all the other weapon types in the game. Like, swords have to sometimes come out here when you don't want to come out here for swords. You just want to sort of stick around here. You maybe want to invest in cluster jewels. Traps and mines have a sort of similar thing going. There are in some cases, particularly when you're playing dot-based trap and mine builds, you may want stuff in like this part of the tree and this part of the tree, but you kind of have to put some extra points around here, and this sort of opens up a lot of opportunities. The other thing a lot of people are missing are the cluster jewels, right? So basically with this setup, because you don't have to invest as many points onto the tree, you can now invest more into cluster jewels. And so a lot of people looking at, a lot of people have this mindset where they're just trying to compare the 3 best anointments or the 4 best anointments they can get and saying, okay, this is 40% more damage on an amulet, it's now my best in slot. Except you're not really looking at the true potential of this amulet. And that is, like, for a lot of builds, you could just, say you need a certain amount of anoints here, and this is going to cost you, like, say 20, 30 points, paving up to this part of the tree to get the notables that you want. So instead you just anoint them, and then you can run an entire extra large and medium cluster jewel setup, which is giving you access to 2 additional small jewels, and it's a ton of extra damage into your build on top of what just getting 3 good damage anoints would be, by completely rearranging the way you pave around the tree to include an entire extra cluster jewel setup into your build. You can actually squeeze out a lot more DPS than just whatever, your top 3 anoints are, which means the ceiling on this is a lot higher than a lot of you guys are thinking. So I said I wanted to talk about the other applications of this thing that a lot of people weren't talking about, and here we are. So the first thing is the application of anointing timeless jewel converted notables. So, and that's what you see here. I'm using Elegant Hubris as an example, but you can do a similar thing with Militant Faith, Glorious Vanity, etc. Basically, the way this works is you would put Elegant Hubris over here in a section of the tree that you're not paving to, you don't have a lot of reason to be at. And then Elegant Hubris is going to convert a bunch of notables into potentially good things, also potentially bad. This is just an example. Elegant Hubris I pulled out. Don't think you need to copy this number here to get these things. This is just an example I made to sort of show you the concept of how it would work. So what you would want to do is put it in here and find a setup where you're getting 4 potentially really good notables that just aren't accessible, but they exist on the tree. And then you want to find maybe 1 or 2 notables that are kind of close by that you can reasonably reach. So this example here, we're spending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to put the Elegant Hubris into the tree. We're spending another 2 for 80% crit. And then we're doing 4 anoints for 4 Rigwald's Mites. So as you can see, 80% increased melee damage, 80% increased melee fizz, etc., etc. And that totals 320% increased damage via our 4 anoints and a very small investment on the tree. This is a ton of damage, right? Like, this is actually a really, really good application of this jewel that a lot of people are sleeping on, and a lot of people are going to continue to sleep on because it requires a lot of effort and a lot of planning, and also a lot of game knowledge in order to sort of figure out the best way to min-max this sort of thing. It's going to require a lot of divine orbs, a lot of trial and error. There's not going to be any way that a guide can teach you a certain setup. This is something you're going to have to work out in a league for yourself, but it's going to be absolutely worth doing, and almost every, build in the game is going to have some kind of application where you could get some really cool benefits out of timeless jewels if you put your mind to it and you figure out a really good setup and also hit a really good combination on your timeless jewel, right? And there isn't anything special here. You just allocate the nodes that you would normally allocate in these slots, and then they're going to allocate the converted nodes. Now, the final topic I wanted to talk about is also the most important one, and that is that Stranglegasps are Val-proof. That means you cannot technically brick them with Val Orbs. In fact, the worst case scenario for using a Val Orb on your Stranglegasp is that it stays the same and doesn't do anything, because the other outcomes are that it either gains a Corrupt Implicit, which in pretty much every case is going to be better than the all attributes you're getting on it already, or alternatively, the best case scenario is that it quote-unquote bricks. It turns into a rare amulet, which gives you an assortment of random stats. Because guess what? The way these items work, items that give multiple, have room for multiple anointments on them, they keep their anoints even when they lose the unique modifier that says they can have multiple anoints or slash enchants, right? And this is the way the Blight Helms already work. For anyone who knows how lab running works, the way the Blight Helms work are that you put 2 anoints on there, and then you Val Orb the Blight Helm in order to try and brick it and turn it into a rare item, and then gain actual stats that are useful to you, rather than using the stats on the unique Blight Helm, because you then get to keep the 2 anoints. You can do the same thing here, and here's sort of like, this is probably a, I wouldn't say this is a random assortment. This is an assortment of good stats, but I just wanted to use it as an example of what you could potentially get. So you could potentially get your 4 notables that you want, your implicit of your amulet, obviously, because that didn't get corrupted, and then you could get 6 stats that are potentially useful to you. Stuff like global fizz damage, crit chance, crit multi, armor, life, and all res. There are some pretty good stats in the amulet slot to pick up, and basically, as long as your Stranglegasp bricks, it doesn't brick, it gets stronger. And this is just really good. Like, there is pretty much no downside to valuing your item, except for the fact that it may lose some resale value. And obviously, if you brick your item into a rare one, you can no longer re-anoint it, I don't think, because I think if you try and re-anoint it while it has multiple anoints using Tainted Oil, it may just overwrite them all, or you may only be able to overwrite one. I'm not sure, but I highly doubt there's any functionality in the game at the moment that allows you to pick which one you're overwriting or how you're going to overwrite them all. So I'm pretty sure that turning it into a rare item means you're locking in your anoints pretty much permanently, and then if you obviously just corrupt it and nothing happens, it means that for other people in the future to re-anoint the item, they're going to have to invest Tainted Oils. The cost of Tainted Oils are probably going up given the way this is going to work and the popularity of this item, given that almost everyone in the game can use this item, and so as a result, it's going to lower the resale value, right? People obviously are going to pay a little more for an uncorrupted Stranglegasp, because not only is the cost to re-anoint it going to be lower, it also means they can Val it themselves and potentially get something really cool. One thing to keep in mind if you're going to Val your Stranglegasp is don't potentially double corrupt it. Now, if it's a super common item and you get like tons of these items, okay, maybe you double corrupt it. There's probably not much risk. If this ends up being a 100x item, you have to understand that the risk reward for a double corrupt versus the normal corrupt is kind of disproportionate this time, because you don't actually have the chance of ruining your item when you Val Orb it, but when you double corrupt it, it can get completely destroyed, it can go away, and then you lose a 100x item, which isn't any different to normal, only that regular Val Orbs don't have this effect. So the double corrupt, it's a lot more risk for only slightly more reward. One thing I will point out is that the double corrupt does have the chance to apply influence mods, which means you can potentially get +1 skill gems when you're double corrupting. So the potential ceiling on this item is even higher when you're double corrupting. At the same time, it may not be worth the risk. I just thought it was worth pointing out so that you sort of keep this in mind, that just a regular Val, you could freely Val Orb this item without any problems as long as you've already anointed it, but double corrupting, you probably will have to think twice about if this ends up being rare. So I just wanted to take a moment to sort of talk about the importance of this item. There was one content creator I spoke to that wasn't exactly convinced that this item was worth the hype, and I felt that perhaps there are some people out there that aren't convinced as well, and maybe it's worth giving an explanation to what's important about this item. So the thing you have to consider is that, obviously, aside from everything we already mentioned, that's really cool, you have to look at this in 2 ways. First off, who is it BIS for? So for those of you who don't know what BIS stands for, BIS means best in slot. It basically just means, is this item the best potential item for that slot of gear? Is this the best amulet in the game for your particular build? There are a lot of builds in the game that this is best in slot for. I pulled out some of the top toxic rain profiles, and by being able to add a third cluster jewel setup with the use of Stranglegasp, we were able to get 5% more DPS out without even having a corrupted Stranglegasp. for pretty much every attack build in the game that aren't using specific unique amulets that are build enabling, Stranglegasp is BIS. There are even some spell builds which, because they're already scaling gem levels from external means, they don't need to get the extra gem levels on their amulet. Stranglegasp, BIS. I would probably say more than half of all the builds in the game consider Stranglegasp the best in slot item. This means that if it's rare, not only is the supply going to be very low, the demand is going to be extremely high. Extremely high, right? Everyone in the game is going to want this item. If you consider with like something like Headhunter, not everyone even enjoys playing with a Headhunter. It's not something that fits into every build neatly. You know, like a lot of Chaos builds don't really have any purpose for running a Headhunter other than potentially getting some extra defenses. And if you're not running, you know, super juiced maps like with Beyond, Nemesis sort of stuff on them, you don't necessarily need a Headhunter. There are a lot of people last league, you know, content creators, players, people on my friends list, people in my guild, viewers of mine that had headhunters and didn't use them. I was one of those people. I was carrying around 2 headhunters for the first week of the league. I didn't have any use for them because none of the builds I was playing really, you know, benefited from a headhunter over a regular belt. And you can get some pretty nice things off regular belts or unique belts in some cases. So this, on the other hand, more than 50% of the builds in the game want this. You could just slap this onto a lot of builds, slap a couple of good anoints onto it, and you're good to go in most cases. So I actually think the demand for this is going to be potentially higher than Headhunter. It's very important in that way, and that's going to drive up the price, especially if it's rare, and that's a really big deal. Now, the other thing to sort of consider in all this is best in slot is only one part of this discussion. What about whether this is just better than other items for its cost? Because what if this is like say a Badge of the Brotherhood situation, where this item is semi-common within the league it's released. So maybe in future leagues it's going to be really rare, but maybe in Scourge League, this only ends up being like a 2x item or something. I highly doubt it, but let's say that ends up being the case. So there are a lot of builds that this isn't best in slot for, but it's still better than the best in slot for, you know, the potential budget in that case. If the best in slot item costs 200x in some cases, and Stranglegasp costs 2x, you could buy Stranglegasp very early in the league and have an almost best in slot, you know, power level item for 2x, which is going to power creep the hell out of builds for even casual players. It's going to power creep league start builds. This is going to be a very big deal to the meta game of PoE if it's cheap, which is also why I don't think it's going to be cheap. There's almost no chance it's going to be cheap, given how influential it's going to be, especially once people start PoEing this and figuring out the ceiling on this, and that they can add an extra cluster jewel setup, which for most builds you want to do. Everyone's going to want this item, and not everyone's going to have it. Keep in mind, this is only going to be able to drop from Blight-ravaged maps, and item level 90 maybe to me indicates that it's not even going to be a very common item. It may drop from like bosses in some, under some conditional scenario. Like, we don't know. It's anyone's guess at this point, but you know, I think especially the item level being 90 indicates that this is going to be a very rare item. It's going to be very hard to obtain. It may be like one of the rarest items that is released in Scourge League. It could be like the jackpot, the chase item of the whole league. We don't know because we haven't seen the other items. You know, like maybe GGG just decided that every unique this league has to be this insane. You know, they have said that they wanted every unique this league to be good, and so maybe this is just like the new power level that they're releasing this league, and we're going to get a bunch of cool new uniques that can be used in every build. But also maybe not. Maybe this is the best. Maybe this is the best we have, and they're showing it off just because they want to generate a bit of hype, because yesterday's Sacred Orb announcement sort of didn't go well, and they thought, hey, we want to win, we want to keep the hype going until the release of the announcement. So maybe they just previewed this a little early. I don't know, but this is a very, 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 very big deal. Take it to the bank, right? I have been known to be wrong. I'm not going to be wrong about this. I promise you, under no circumstance is this item not going to be an extremely big deal in future Path of Exile leagues. If you like this video, give me a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.